qualify for CPE credit, attendees must watch the full presentation and complete a minimum of 3 check-ins, which pop up at sporadic intervals. When they appear, click the check mark to confirm that you are watching. Please note, if you are viewing the presentation in full screen mode, you have to hit Escape on your keyboard to access and submit the check-in. If you meet the CPE requirements, you will be able to access your CPE certificate by clicking on the CPE certificate icon on the toolbar. From there, click on the certificate graphic. At the conclusion of the session, we ask that you please complete the evaluation by clicking on the survey icon below. Your feedback is important to us, and we hope you enjoy this session.
Hey there, I'm Tom Brown with Wiley, and we are excited to support IMA's first virtual conference and sponsor the Accounting Hot Topics track. Here at Wiley, we know it's hard to juggle personal and professional obligations while you study. This is why our CMA course helps you manage your time while mastering exam content. A few tools, like our exam planner to keep you on track and score predictor to let you know when you're exam day ready and help ensure you pass the first time. My team and I hope you enjoy this session and stop by the Wiley booth for some giveaways and free content.
Hello, my name is Hagen Rogers, and I am pleased to be with you for the next hour or so to present this presentation titled Top M&A Fumbles and Landmines That Every Accountant Should Know. This content, you're going to have probably experienced some of this being an accountant, and some of this may be new for you. So I'm hoping that there'll be a lot of revelation and a lot of takeaways that you can incorporate into your career on behalf of your clients, the acquirer clients, and helping them do a better job of M&A. So before I get started, let me tell you a little bit about myself and my career. So I am the founder of Watermark Advisors, which is an investment banking firm that is based in Greenville, South Carolina. And my career has taken me in several cities and different companies, from Dallas to Houston, Texas, to Nashville, Charlotte, and Atlanta, ultimately starting Watermark several years ago. And over the years, I have handled over 80 M&A and investment banking transactions. We work on both the buy side and the sell side, and believe that balancing both brings better skills to the table for the client. And I'm also very proud of helping launch over 65 interns into their careers into the M&A and financial world. So a little bit about Watermark. Watermark was established in 2002, and we are best known for what we call the M&A bridge. You can see a picture here. This is actually a bridge in Greenville, South Carolina. It's a suspension bridge, a walking bridge. And I want you to think about this bridge. I'm going to be using this as a metaphor throughout the presentation today. This is a shaky bridge. So if you were in Greenville and were to step out onto the Liberty Bridge and there were a lot of people walking across this bridge, it would actually vibrate and shake, which is a little unsettling, which is similar to the feeling that most of us have as we are on doing M&A. And whether you're the client, the practitioner, we know that M&A is a risky endeavor. However, it can have great results. And so today, the revelations I'm going to share with you are intended to help you get your client to better outcomes. So Watermark provides Wall Street level M&A services at reasonable fee levels, and we prepare buyers and sellers to success. And we're first with what we call an Alliance approach. And you're going to hear that concept as it relates to the M&A bridge throughout the presentation. Alliance recognizes the fact that not one firm can bring all the skills to all the processes required to do M&A well. So we, over the years, have become humble enough to recognize that it takes really, truly an alliance of partnerships. And those partners have unique skills that bring their skills onto the bridge to help the client. And in a partnership format, in a collaborative effort, we get to better outcomes for the client. So we're going to focus today on advising an acquirer, and more specifically, an infrequent acquirer. What do I mean by that term, infrequent? When I think of infrequent, I think of a company that is a strategic acquirer, not a financial buyer. They are a larger company, probably 70 million to say a billion plus in annual revenues. And M&A is becoming more important to them. They've probably made at least one acquisition over the last decade, if not multiple, up to, I'd say, 5 or 6. Once you surpass 6 transactions in a decade, you're starting to learn from your mistakes and put in place best practices that we're going to talk about today. So I'm really talking about that infrequent acquirer. And what we have here is a picture of the target company. And that target is very similar to looking at an iceberg. When you look at an iceberg, you see what's above the water, and that's easy to see. And in the case of M&A, that target being an iceberg, what you see is their financial situation, the industry conditions they're operating in, the brand that they have built, the competitors they battle against year in, year out, and the market share that they have. But there's a lot below the surface, just like an iceberg, that the skilled acquirer knows that the game is won or lost in looking below the water at issues that much of the time deals with people issues, morale of the team, of the acquirer, of the target company. The turnover that the employee base has had, the labor relations, the compensation structure, the accounting systems, and the culture. These are issues that are harder to get to on surface. And it takes really a team of skilled practitioners to help you, the acquirer, uncover that. And as the accountant, you have to be mindful of below the iceberg, and that's where the battle is won or lost for your client. How well do infrequent acquirers perform? That's a question that is a timeless question, and it has been documented in numerous studies. And you can read year in, year out various articles on how M&A is so difficult and failure rate is high. Is it true? I set out well into my career to uncover the truth of that argument. And what I learned was, it is in fact true, but it's how you define failure which makes all the difference in defending and having that argument. So I turned to Dr. Robert Bruner. The picture you see here is a picture of Dr. Bruner. He was the former dean of UVA's Darden Business School, and he perhaps did the most comprehensive analysis of M&A results, looking at over 120 studies that were across multiple decades of acquirers and how they handled the acquisition and their outcomes. And what he concluded here, in quote, only 20 to 30% of all transactions earn returns significantly in excess of their cost of capital. The average benchmark adjusted return to corporate investment in M&A is close to zero. Sounds pretty pessimistic. The low success rate, however, reported by 4 methods in which he looked at these 120 studies, does not mean that acquisitions are not a smart investment. Rather, the research shows that executives have choices to make. And when those choices are made thoughtfully, they can tilt the odds of success in the acquirer's favor. So there is a ray of hope here. Thus, the reason why M&A is used year in, year out globally to help companies grow successfully. But it is the infrequent acquirer who has the higher risk of making the poor deal decisions and integrating that acquisition badly or overpaying, Bruner reports. So I want to first define one term that he used, the failure rate, and specifically how he defined that. So let's look at this chart here at the hurdle rate for acquisitions. You see at the very top of this image, a green line, which we call a hurdle rate. And the y-axis shows this hurdle rate to be 12%, which means that in recent years across corporate America, in the US, there has been on average a hurdle rate expectation of above a 12% annual return on investment. So that means that boards to approve of an acquisition, they want to see that the annual return of making that acquisition will be at or above 12%. Why 12%? Well, in corporate America, the weighted average cost to capital is quite low and has been for some time. The blue area in this image is the weighted average cost to capital, that combination of debt and equity costs that companies employ to run their business. The gray area in between the green line and the blue space is called a hurdle rate delta. And so the companies will, while they strive and expect a return above that 12% line, many acquisitions fall into this hurdle rate delta, which is between the weighted average cost to capital and the hurdle rate. And that is a moderate success. Great success is above the green line, and a financial failure is really in the blue space, meaning the cost of making the acquisition is greater than the returns. So that's pretty troubling. And unfortunately, what Bruner is saying is only 20 to 30% of the time are deals achieving returns at or above this green line. Why is that so? So let's look into why this is happening so persistently and where are the commonalities in the problems. Well, look at all of these processes that one may or will need to consider when making an acquisition. You have literally 25 plus different processes that the acquirer needs to ponder and implement in order to do M&A well. Sounds pretty daunting, and in fact it is. And like I said at the beginning of the presentation, really it's rare to find a firm that has all of these skills that you can hire to help you, the acquirer, handle this. But yet all of these are important. So that's really the big picture problem, is that there are so many processes where any one of these, a mistake can be made, and that mistake can have a problem with and ultimately damage the ability to achieve a return at or above that hurdle rate. So what I want to do for the balance of the presentation is focus on just 9 problems that occur across this bridge, this shaky bridge that are persistent problems that over the course of my 25-year career, I see them happen time and time again, specifically with the infrequent acquirers. And I'm going to label them as fumbles and landmines. So what is a fumble and what is a landmine? Well, we know in the real world, a fumble is often used a term in football when an offensive player on a football team loses the ball. They're trying to hold on to the ball, they fumble it. But in business, and specifically in M&A, what I'm using the term fumble to mean, think on this bridge, it's a mishandled process. Okay, a mishandled process, meaning the executive team of the buyer knows this process is important, and yet they mishandle it. Different than a landmine. A landmine is really more of a process that is overlooked by the management team for its impactfulness and in the overall outcome, and they pay the price. They know, they may be aware, they've heard of the process, but they don't deploy much resource behind it, if any. They focus elsewhere they emphasize other processes and de-emphasize certain processes. Those processes that are de-emphasized and ultimately come back to haunt them when they hit a certain point of the bridge, most likely the last third of the bridge, they hit a point where there's a blow up, and the blow up happens because they overlooked a process back on the bridge. Now, why do companies have a persistent problem in these fumbles and landmines? Well, they're different. Fumbles are rooted in different problems than landmines. Let me explain. So fumbles, again, are overlooked processes. Mishandled processes. And they're mishandled typically because of that for financial reasons, the CEO doesn't want to spend as much as they need to on resourcing that process. So they may put someone on their internal team in that position to handle that process, but the internal team member is really not skilled enough to handle that process well. They lack experience. And so the lack of experience shows up in a fumble. A landmine happens often because the acquirer is an infrequent acquirer, and they really don't have the full grasp of all of those processes I showed you a minute ago that need to be well thought out, and that there needs to be an internal or external team handling the process. So the CEO perhaps has not handled M&A before. The company is an infrequent acquirer, so they haven't crossed the bridge frequent enough to know the problems that or the processes they need to undertake. And a third very common issue with landmines is that acquirer goes out and hires an investment banking firm, and they think that because that investment firm is very expensive, that's going to be comprehensive, that investment banking firm is going to help them with the addition of a lawyer and an accounting firm, help them really handle the significant processes. And yet there are other processes that the investment banking firm is not skilled on. And in fact, the law firm and the accounting firm is also not skilled on. And those processes are overlooked and become a big problem. So here's the bridge from a process perspective. We break down all those processes I showed earlier into 3 phases. There's a preparation phase, and all the red blocks are preparation phase processes that need to be contemplated. Then you have the transaction phase. You have all the due diligence in white. I call that defense. Then you have the blue, which is what your client is hiring the investment banking firm to handle. That is what I call core M&A. The green is integration, and integration planning happens simultaneous with the core M&A blue. And then you have a whole third of the bridge, which is integration execution, which is integration execution, communications, and cultural integration. All of these processes need to be pondered and then resourced as the acquirer. Now, the fumbles happen in all 3 phases. And what I want to focus on first are the fumbles that happen and landmines in the preparation phase. And I'm going to specifically focus on just 3, although there are plenty more that happen. What I want to emphasize, the fumbles and landmines that occur in the preparation phase are in developing your team, both your internal and external team, the bottom 2 red blocks on the left, commercial due diligence on the market, and then the target approaches. Those 3 issues become problematic time and time again. I want you to think about the fact that M&A is a people process. It takes people to run M&A, to handle the M&A, to make it happen. And so the problems in M&A come out of people, the personalities of the people you bring on your team, the lack of bringing enough people, the skills of those people. So let's just break this down. And I'd say one of the most significant fumbles that are made here by the acquirer is that they don't bring this team together, the internal and the external team, until the deal itself, the transaction is now signed under letter of intent, and now it's time to scramble to put that internal and external team together. And in the haste of that, they miss bringing on board certain team members. And then I want you to think about the fact that the internal team they bring on board, certain team members may be inexperienced. They don't have the full skill set of the process they need to have. And that becomes a problem. And then think about the fact those internal team members already have job responsibilities, which is a full-time day job. And then they're being asked to come on board and help this M&A team as well, which is M&A is not only a people process, but it's a very attention to detail set of skills. And so these team members are often overtaxed, overstretched, and mistakes get made. And so really this fumble can be resolved with the CEO staffing the internal and external team, recognizing that they need to put this team together early. They need to educate this team. They need to identify their weaknesses internally and staff an external team to complement their internal team. And when that's done, and done in a timely manner, well early in the preparation phase, this fumble can be avoided. Let me tell you a brief story. There's a company that I've worked with that is a fiber optics manufacturer and installer of products and equipment in the telecom space. They consistently have a low rate of return. They don't hit that hurdle rate enough. Why is that? The business development director that's charged with staffing the M&A team, both internal and external, had some moderate level of M&A experience when he was put into this business development director role. And this happens a lot, and I'm sure you've seen this being the accountant. There's a sense of humiliation that can occur when a business development director recognizes the deficiencies of their team and even their own M&A skills, and they go to their CEO and ask to need to really build out and staff an external team. They're concerned that their job is at risk, that they should already have these competencies. Maybe they oversold themselves in their M&A expertise. So there's a sense of humiliation that they just want to avoid, and they avoid it by not bringing on board a full external team. Also kind of the flip side of that is they want to have a notch on their belt to say, hey, they successfully have handled M&As. They've got that down. They know how to handle M&As across the bridge. Therefore, they don't staff it well, and they want to handle more of it themselves so they can get that experience. This results in problems, and specifically for this fiber optics manufacturer, because they've had kind of a pretty shoddy track record of closing deals and then capturing ROI. Even recently, they've resulted in a closed deal of a company they bought in 2020, which was resulted in lawsuits after the deal is closed. The fact that they have post-closing adjustments that are not agreed upon between the target and them. They have ended up in lawsuits that are costly, timely, draining on the resources. So huge decision that can make or break M&A success here really early on in the fumbles. Well, let me talk about a landmine that happens with commercial due diligence. Now, being an accountant, you're going to know, you're going to know very well likely what commercial due diligence is. However, many infrequent acquirers don't know that term, don't know the significance of commercial due diligence. And let me define commercial due diligence on the market. So it's really using, in the age of data, we're in the age of big data, that the acquirer really goes deep with data research on evaluating different markets to determine which market are they prioritizing to grow and to leverage M&A to do. This is surprisingly not done as thoroughly at the senior level as you might believe. And by probing as their CPA to how have they conducted research and due diligence on the market in which they want to make acquisitions can make a big difference. And case in point, I recently had a conversation with a business development director of a client I've had for about 10 years. The BDD is new to the company as of the last year. And in my conversation, he shared, Hagen, I'm really toying with several different types of acquisitions. They had a great 2020. COVID proved very well for their business. They had significant one-time gains in business that ties to the fact they're in the healthcare space. And they have cash to deploy and want to grow with M&A. But what I really quickly caught on was this business development director did not have a keen sense of what type of M&A they wanted to prioritize, whether it is a roll-up strategy or an acquisition of a direct competitor to grow market share. He couldn't answer that. And when you dug below that, he really didn't have a priority of what market they have prioritized. And so you may find that your client, and this needs to take place, this conversation, well before there's a live deal, to learn how have they deployed big data research into analyzing the markets. They may have competing markets that they're contemplating growing in. You may learn that they haven't done as thorough a job as they should have in getting down on the ground level, that if they have hire an external commercial due diligence party, and there are many, a lot of times those are in accounting firms, that can make a big difference in gaining clarity on which market they want to prioritize. This is a landmine. Okay. So next, and the third and final fumble and landmine I want to talk about in the preparation phase is the approach. The approach is how that acquirer approaches a target to explore a transaction. Now, this sounds pretty simple, right? You would think that this is not such a big deal, but in fact, it is really handled in an ad hoc way too often, and that the acquirer fumbles in how they approach a target that is really a great opportunity if they can convince that target to proceed into a transaction phase. They don't handle it well, and they really turn off and kind of damage completely, burn the bridge, so to speak, with the target, thereby never entering a transaction phase. Why is it done? Because the acquirer doesn't really think about the who, what, where, when, why, and how of the approach. And it's really a method. Who is going to make this approach? What team member? When are they going to make the approach to the target? Who are they going to speak with at the target company? In what setting is that approach going to take place? How does the conversation unfold? And this really needs to be preconceived and well thought out. There are many different ways to approach a target at an industry conference, a warm introduction through a colleague that knows somebody at that company. Even an investment banking firm can help make that introduction. And LinkedIn can be a great, as we know now, a great resource to figure out how to connect with that company. But it needs to be very well thought out. So here's a story for you. Again, a company here in South Carolina that's in the e-commerce business, and they are an e-commerce retailer in home products. And they had a great adversary, a competitor that was on the West Coast. Here they are on the East Coast. And they had enough cash. They wanted to approach the CEO. They had heard rumors that the CEO may be thinking about an exit. And the owner of this company that I know made this approach and just directly contacted the target owner and directly said, "Hey, we hear you're for sale. We'd like to talk to you about that." Well, that really was the wrong approach, the wrong timing, the wrong way to share the interest, and it blew up. And basically, the target owner hung up the phone and responded, "Don't ever call me again." Mishandled, lost opportunity. That target company ultimately did sell, but not to the company, the company I'm referring to. So this is needs to be well thought out and tactically handled. So let's turn now to the transaction phase. Now, this is where life gets much more complicated for the acquirer, the internal team, the external team of the acquirer. Now you've got a live man, you're under exclusivity, you've signed a letter of intent, and you have several months only to explore the due diligence, the under the water of the iceberg, to determine what the issues really are and how to structure this deal to minimize your risk and close successfully to capture ROI. You have the white, the due diligence, you have the blue, the core M&A, and the green. So where in the red, the preparation phase, those steps are sequential. The processes in the transaction phase are simultaneous. And look at all these processes you've got to be thinking about. It's very challenging to deploy these simultaneous processes in such a way that each process is being influenced or influencing. And fumbles and landmines are vast. So, but let me focus on just a few. The first I'm going to cover here in the transaction phase is the due diligence itself and the influence due diligence has. The second is, again, commercial due diligence, but here I'm talking about commercial due diligence a little differently. It's due diligence on the target itself. Next, I'm going to talk about cultural due diligence, and that is the dragon, I call it, often in the transaction phase. I'll talk about why that is in just a minute. And then in the core M&A, synergies, evaluating synergies, allowing synergies to influence both the deal design and the transaction structuring, but also integration is often mishandled. And then integration planning can be a fumble or a landmine. I'm going to give you some specific reasons why this is often a big problem for infrequent acquirers. So let's dive in here into the transaction phase. Due diligence. I call it defense. So you have defense and offense in football. In M&A, defense is due diligence, offense is integration. So due diligence is quite vast. And where is the fumble that occurs? The fumble occurs in due diligence in that the CEO, again, may under-resource due diligence, and they don't think about due diligence broadly enough. They don't think all of the different areas. So you as the accountant are most often focused on financial and tax. Maybe not so surprising to hear that that's most often staffed and handled through Q of E reports, quality of earnings, and that's often top of mind for the acquirer and commissioned and resourced by a CPA firm. Legal due diligence often is handled very well too. What's not handled well or overlooked can be, or under-resourced, mishandled, are commercial due diligence, cultural due diligence, HR, reputational due diligence. What I mean by reputational due diligence is the regulatory side of the target's business. Are they in compliance with regulatory issues? Those can be a big problem and risk for the buyer if not assessed properly in the due diligence phase. IT, more and more cyber issues are growing, and the property, real property, environmental risks. So you have a lot of, really about 10 to 15 different areas of due diligence, including insurance, due diligence. It can be a problem. And so this is a fumble because it is the way in which due diligence is handled by the infrequent acquirer is an issue. Let me explain why. Not only do may they not think broadly enough about due diligence, but how they go about the due diligence is often the main problem. The way due diligence is handled best is that it is handled in a data gathering is step one, just simply asking direct questions of the target company and identifying data that you want to collect. From data, you go to information. Information is, okay, gathering the data and gaining information about the target company itself. Think of that iceberg again. Think about above and below. Information is you've gathered the data and now you're piecing together the data to say, what does this mean about the target company? Okay. Taking that information, here's where the mistake is often made and not done well, that information then translates into knowledge. Knowledge not only about the deal, but knowledge about what does it mean for owning this target company, about integration. What does it mean to direct us about structuring the deal, about planning for synergies? That therefore, due diligence needs to inform the decision makers on the internal team about how to structure the deal, how to manage the risk post-closing, how to capture the synergies. And it's just not done well. Often because there's such a time constraint to due diligence. Again, why I say put your due diligence team in place early, and that can be a great bonus for you. So And also that due diligence is not really affecting the decision making. It's kind of a checklist, it's checking of the box, it's documenting it, and you should document it, but you need to allow due diligence to influence you. Often the buyer gets so far into the deal, into the transaction phase, that there's a bias to just close the deal and not let the due diligence speak to you and say, hey, there are risks here, and these risks are meaningful, and we need to step back and say, do we even want to close the deal? Some of the best decisions made on the bridge are allowing due diligence to help you reach the conclusion that you shouldn't close this deal. You shouldn't buy this company and take on the risk. So due diligence broadly and its ability to influence the transaction and integration is fumble number 3. Fumble number 4 is commercial due diligence on the target itself. So we've talked about in the preparation phase commercial due diligence as it relates to the market. Now I'm talking about on the target. And what I mean by that is that you, the buyer team and the buyer, does not take the projections and especially the revenue assumptions at face value. You really conduct a on the ground conversations that validate the customers. What do the customers say about this business? What do the suppliers say about the target company? Are they promoters? Are they passive about their relationship with this company? Are they detractors? Would you have conversations and learn that, hey, this company's financially doing well, but the rhetoric, the story behind what's going on behind the scenes is not so good. And you're about to, the numbers are divorced from what narrative is actually going on in conversations. So you're really looking for here, what's going right, what's going wrong. Is demand growing with this company? Do the projections that have been shared with you, the revenue and cost projections, are they in line with the real story, what you're really hearing, and why not? This is time consuming, and often the buyer, because this is a fumble, it's mishandled. The buyer doesn't put forth the right resources, the right skills to go into the market and evaluate. And often the objection is, the target company is not going to let us talk to our clients. Why would they let us talk to our clients as putting them at risk before they close the business? And that is true. But here's how you can overcome that, advise your client to overcome that. When they're drafting the letter of intent, putting in that letter of intent milestones that basically dictate when you, the buyer, will be allowed to have conversations with the target company. Agreeing to those milestones in the letter of intent and saying, hey, we need to do this. This is important for us. We're asking that we have this in the letter of intent. That can overcome that objection. And then it's about having the right team. And often this can be a third-party commission skill, but it is a huge fumble when it's not done and not done well. Now we come to what's perhaps the greatest landmine in the transaction phase, which is cultural due diligence. This man here is now well up in age. He's in his 80s or 90s, but he's been a very well-respected organizational behaviorist from MIT, Edgar Sheehan. He said, culture may be loosely thought about, but it's only after the merger that it is taken seriously, suggesting that most leaders make the assumption that they can fix cultural problems after the fact. I would argue that leaders must make cultural analysis as central to an M&A decision as the financial, product, or market analysis itself. That is wisdom for the ages. I can tell you that cultural due diligence is often it's just left out. It's not thought of with the respect it needs to have. Why is that? Because the first thought is, when the buyer's putting forth their team, is hiring an investment bank, hiring a CPA firm, hiring a law firm. Well, which of those three have cultural expertise? The fact is, we know the answer to that is none of the three. And therefore, there's a real need to default. The buyer needs to recognize that the skills of effective cultural due diligence are not going to be in any one of those three, most likely. And therefore, those three are not going to emphasize that cultural due diligence is very significant, as significant as it needs to be. And it's kind of left off the table. Therefore, how the buyer overcomes this landmine is they need to know this is a problem, and they need to handle it with their own HR team. They need to hire. If they're going to be an M&A, infrequent acquirer, even frequent acquirer, their HR staff needs to have this skill set internally. They need to hire with these skills in mind. And you're looking, when you think of cultural due diligence, you're looking really across three levels or planes. You're looking at the target's actions and aspirations. Is their culture consistent with the aims of their firm? Secondly, you're looking and needing to evaluate the culture of the buyer in light of the culture of the target. How aligned are they? How different are they? And how do you overcome those differences? And then thirdly, between the target's culture and their strategic threats and opportunities. There are just so many war stories on culture. I want to highlight one that's notorious, and that is the Daimler-Chrysler merger of the late 1990s. We probably have, if you've been around in your career a while, you probably know of this. Was a complete disaster when there was a merger of equals between Daimler and Chrysler. And I'm going to read just a few lines of a case study that's notorious, that's taught in the business schools on this M&A disaster that's rooted in cultural clashes and a cultural due diligence that was so poorly done. But often what happens, the rhetoric at the beginning of the transaction on the bridge as the deal is being contemplated, wow, there's just, whoa, what great cultural match we have, but there's very little done to evaluate it. And then as the deal progresses and it's closed and you're dealing with integration, there's disasters that occur. So just a few lines here. To the principals involved in the deal, there was no clash of cultures. There was a remarkable meeting of the minds at the senior management level. They look like us. They talk like us. They're focused on the same things and their command of English is impeccable. There was definitely no culture clash there, quote unquote. Listen how quickly the rhetoric changes. Chrysler's president from September 1999 through November 2000 described what he saw as marrying up, marrying down phenomenon. Mercedes was universally perceived as the fancy, special brand, while Chrysler, Dodge, Plymouth, and Jeep were the poor, blue-collar relations. This fueled an undercurrent of tension, which was amplified by the fact that the American workers earned appreciably more than their German counterparts, sometimes 4 times as much. This dislike and distrust ran deep, with some Daimler-Benz executives publicly declaring they would, quote unquote, never drive a Chrysler. And then the rhetoric just continues to devolve. In autumn 2000, Daimler CEO let it be known to the world via a German financial daily that he had always intended Chrysler to be a mere subsidiary of Daimler. Quote unquote, the merger of equals statement was necessary in order to earn the support of Chrysler's workers and the American public, but it was never a reality. To be sure, it was apparent from day one that Daimler was the majority shareholder in the conglomerate. It controlled the majority of seats on the supervisory board, yet the Daimler-Chrysler name and 2 parallel management structures under co-CEOs at separate headquarters lent credence to a quote-unquote merger of equals notion. Therefore, this was just a disaster, and it unwound. And not only was ROI completely lost, but these companies were damaged as a result. So cultural due diligence, I can't emphasize enough what a landmine and what a need to improve in how we handle that, how we raise that as advisors to our clients. Okay, we're coming in on the last 2. We have a fumble and a landmine as we wrap up the transaction phase. The fumble number 5 is synergies. And the problem with synergies is there's a synergy bias that occurs. Not only that, so what do I mean by bias? That you're now so deep into the weeds of the deal. You've spent a lot of money. You're way out on the bridge, and you just want to close the deal. The buyer will perhaps disregard some of the due diligence, disregard some of the knowledge takeaway, and incorporate bias into the synergy numbers. Each synergy needs to be identified, needs to be quantified, and valued. Okay. So when you're valuing a synergy, you literally come up with a valuation of each synergy. And you think about the timing of that synergy, the duration of that synergy, and how large the value is of that synergy. So we go back to some of the original problems on the bridge, in that the buyer CEO doesn't resource this process well. The person put in charge of synergies may be internal. They've not had a lot of experience in evaluating synergies, and so therefore they focus too much on cost synergies. They don't focus on revenue enough. They don't focus on financial synergies. They don't even evaluate them properly. They don't prioritize them properly. And synergies need to influence not only the deal team in structuring the deal, negotiating the purchase agreements and the deal structure, but also integration planning. Without great work in synergy analysis, your integration planning and execution is going to suffer. So this becomes a real problem. The bias of just trying to get to a closed deal. You overestimate the synergy valuation. Therefore, you overestimate the ability to capture value in this transaction. And synergies are conceptually easy to define, but hard to execute. And especially when I go back to M&A's a people business, and you're acquiring people that of the target company that have to help you execute this, it becomes a real challenge. So you as the CPA need to early raise way back in the preparation phase, and who's handling the synergies, the valuation, the identification, the capture, even in integration. Synergies are the glue for M&A. Without the right staffing, the right perspectives and handling of synergies, that glue is going to be weak. It's going to result in real problems in M&A. The final issue in the transaction phase is integration planning. This is a landmine. It's a landmine because there is deal fatigue, say 30, 45 days out from close. Just talking about all these processes, I'm sure you're thinking this is exhausting to think about. And it is. M&A is an exhausting bridge to cross. But you are the trusted CPA. And therefore, you have to raise the fact that this is a landmine. Planning integration has to take place 30, 45 days out. The person who plans it or the team that plans it needs to have the proper resources. They need to have enough time. They need to be influenced by the due diligence team, influenced by what's happening with synergy analysis, the deal structuring, the negotiations. And then they need to be forward thinking into managing the risks, capturing the synergies, capturing the ROI. I put on this slide multiple points that need to be thought about, often what go into a playbook. A playbook can be used in one deal. It can be used repeatedly across many deals. But this is the lack of energy, the lack of thoughtfulness that goes into integration planning, all these different areas is so common. I'll give you a client example. I helped sell a company about 5 years ago that was a lighting control company. So think about if you leave work late at night, the lights in your parking lot are cut on. When dawn happens in the morning, those lights automatically cut off. My client made those lighting controls that control lighting in public fixtures across the country, on highways, for example. The buyer was a manufacturer of power switches and relays for switching and controls. They were an infrequent buyer. They were a private company. They made some acquisitions, but their focus in M&A was so much on the financial, the tax due diligence, the legal due diligence, and really had no planning. They got to the close, they got to the closing day. And what happened day one, as it's notoriously called, the day after the close of the transaction, they weren't even there at the target's site when all the employees learned that their company had been sold. What do you think these employees' number one fear is? What about me? What's going to happen to me? Where is the buyer? The buyer didn't even have a call that day with any of the employees of the target. They had no planning for integration. They were just getting the deal over the finish line. Closing the deal was enough for them. But let me tell you, that's not enough. It is, you now have to move into the third phase of the bridge, which is integration execution. And the planning has to take place. Again, as we can see here, that green takes place simultaneous with the white and the blue. So we're up to the final phase and actually the final fumble, which is cultural integration. Cultural integration. So again, carrying the theme of culture is where so many problems happen. And I'm going to give you some tools here to think about for your client when we talk about cultural integration. Again, this is the last third of the bridge, and integration itself is in like a lion, out like a lamb. Like the month of March, you hear that old saying, March, the month is in like a lion, out like a lamb. Same with integration. Cultural integration is how you're culturally blending the two companies. It's not only people issues, it's process issues as well. So here on the x-axis, I want you to think about cultural integration in three phases. Interdependence is the x-axis, autonomy is the y-axis, the z-axis is controls. What I mean by interdependence is to what degree do you take the buyer's supply chain and overlay it with the target and actually replace some of the target supply chain with yours for economies of scale. Autonomy is the people side of the business. Do you continue to empower the leadership of the target company? That would be high autonomy. Low autonomy would be stripping away, even firing the leadership of the target company. So that decision has to be made with cultural integration. And then controls is to what degree do you put financial controls and systems and processes in place that you may run with your company into the target company. That is the control side. So think about the blend of the three, that you can have low or high on any one of these three. And those decisions, the combination of the three, result in really thoughtful planning for cultural integration. So for example, Berkshire Hathaway, they're notoriously known, they take a preservation approach to cultural integration. What does that mean? It means that high autonomy, whoever they acquire, they continue to empower that management team, the leadership of the target. They don't want that leadership team to leave. They don't plan to fire them. They want to keep them in place. Low controls. So they're not going to implement their own Berkshire Hathaway financial controls. They want that target company's financial controls and processes to continue. Interdependence. They're not going to implement their own supply chain and enforce that supply chain on the target company. Okay. So, but that can vary but company by company. And that combination has to be well thought out, and it may change. It's designed in the playbook, in the integration planning, needs to be executed very well. And it is a major fumble. It's not done well by infrequent acquirers. So we're here at the end here, and we've covered 9 different areas of the 3 phases, the preparation, the transaction, integration phase. What do you conclude? Hopefully, what I want you to take away from all these different areas are the following. So I want you to think of 3 questions as you learn that your client is thinking about M&A, perhaps for the first time, perhaps for second or third time. Have they addressed past mistakes and taken action on those past mistakes? How so? You really need to hold their feet to the fire, challenge them on have they done an after action review on previous deals that either they closed, but they didn't capture ROI. They had defections of people of the target company after the fact. They have war stories. You want them to share those war stories and hear how they've addressed them. Secondly, how holistic is their thinking about M&A? Are they thinking about M&A in all three phases? How are they planning, which goes into the third question or challenge? How are they resourcing both their internal and external team in light of holistic thinking about all the different processes and skills required to cross this very shaky bridge of preparation, transaction, and integration? And you really want to help them think about resourcing, not only financially, putting the right amount of money behind it, but not putting too much into just a great investment bank or that combination of legal, CPA, and investment bank. There are a lot more skills, as we talked about today, that if they don't think about those, become fumbles and landmines, that while financial and tax due diligence may be handled well, or valuation may be handled well, these other areas, the people side, the cultural, the commercial due diligence, are not handled well, and that results in failed M&A. As Bruner said, it's capturing that return on investment at or above the hurdle rate. That's the financial measure of success. The strategic measure of success is that this was the right kind of deal to do, and you, as their very trusted advisor, that CPAs have that trust. I strongly encourage you to challenge, ask these challenging questions, and then help them think through how to resource this well. When you partner with them in this way, they will come back and thank you. They'll spread the word in how you have handled this. And we hope you'll think of Watermark as this holistic provider. We want to work with you and help you think about M&A the right way, this M&A bridge approach. And we collaborate with you to make sure your client does have the best chance at capturing M&A ROI. And it can be done. We want to see more companies get into that 20 to 30%. We want to see more great outcomes. So today, I really thank you for your time. I hope this has been an empowering session, a session where you've learned some revelation on M&A that you can now take back and implement. And I encourage you to reach out to Watermark advisors, to me. I'll be more than happy to explore how we can be helpful, and that this concept of holistic M&A bridge can be best implemented in the marketplace for your benefit and for your client's benefit. So again, it's been a pleasure to be a part of this conference, and hope you have many, many other sessions that are helpful to you during your time. Thank you. Bye-bye.